Okay, so we're going to start right away with Module 1. The procedure for this class actually is going to be we need to look at the theory and then the labs and all that. I've actually posted the labs for everyone, and I would love a situation whereby you get this lab printed out if it's possible, or you could just have it in your system and then begin to walk through the labs. Tomorrow, I will make effort to see before then, you already have the pre-recorded process of installing the virtual box as a virtual machine, and then you can be able to upload all the necessary software that is needed. I've made the links available, and I want to believe every one of us have actually done the installation. But we will just go through that again by tomorrow. For today, I just want to do an intro into this course, and I want to believe that we'll all be on the same page. Some of us actually have been probably going through the cybersecurity essentials. We've done intro to cybersecurity. If you have done all that, this is the best place to be. So after this class, we just want to see the much you'll be able to gain from here. And so in Module 1, we'll be looking at the danger in cybersecurity. And then we're going to look at the topic title, which has to do war stories, threat actors, and the threat impact. And our objectives actually will be why networks and data are attacked, explain the motivations of the threat actors behind specific security incident, and we'll also look at the potential impact on network security. So these are core objectives for this particular chapter. Okay, so let's look at the war stories. You agree with me that hackers have actually set up a number of instruments to be able to gather information from their victim. And so here we can say hackers can set up rogue wireless hotspot posing as a genuine wireless network. When we talk about the rogue, you're actually looking at a falsified kind of network. In some cases, these are networks that are actually directly connected to your system, to your own network, wireless network in some cases, and then be able to have access to your repository or your server, as the case may be. And so this actually is not good for organizations because we're all aware that the wireless network is actually prone to a lot of security issues. And so the rogue wireless hotspots are also known as evil twin hotspot. So in this case of the evil twin, it's a falsified kind of network. In some cases, the network actually, maybe for instance, if your organization name is, let's say, Volkswagen, you could have a wireless hotspot that bears that name, Volkswagen. And this actually falsified wireless network by hackers. And then they made it available for you to connect. And once you connect, of course, they begin to have some kind of direct access to your system. In some cases, because it's a wireless network, they also use it to monitor everything about you in terms of the locations, where you've been to, and all that. That gives them a very good insight of your locations and places where you've been to. So hackers use this a lot. And so most folks just connect to any kind of network they see. Probably at the airport or somewhere, you just see free Wi-Fi and then you get connected. Please, you mute your mic if you're not having questions. So here we're going to look at the ransomed companies.
I know that Claudia.
Hello, can you mute your mic, please?
To get transitioned and learning more about some of the other verticals and modules that we utilize.
Hello.
So that.
Thank you. And so here we'll be looking at the ransomed companies still under danger against cybersecurity. Employees of an organization are often lured into some kind of open attachment, and in some cases, once you open this attachment, you have hackers who have made this available, and then they gain access to some very important information, and then use this as some kind of ransom. and until you pay them, they don't release this vital document. And so a number of companies actually have been frustrated when it comes to hackers having direct access to their vital information. And so here we're looking at targeted nations. Some of today's malware are actually very sophisticated and quite expensive because you have a number of probably companies, organizations coming together to be able to build a more powerful malware. In this case, some of us are aware of the story of the Stocknet, which has to do with how the USB drives was infected and the SS was to be able to gain some kind of access to the Iranian nuclear facility. Of course, this has been a speculation, but for real, you have situations like this that enable hackers actually spread such kind of malware across an entire network. As big as this network is, it was infiltrated through this process. So the flash drive was actually made available, and people could see how nice and good it is, and then plug into a system, and then the malware spread across the system. So the software that was developed by Siemens for their programmable logic controllers, this is actually more or less an embedded system that also provide that platform for the infection. And so here you can see that malware can be built by nations for targeting other nations and all that. And here is actually a video. Once you're going through the curriculum online, you watch a number of videos that will help to give an insight of some of the attacks. And in this lab, like I said, I would like to station where we do all the labs tomorrow. We just use tomorrow to get our VirtualBox installed for those of us who haven't done that. And then we get our cyber workstations all set up. And please remember the specification that you must have probably a computer. It could be a laptop or a desktop. Memory could be 8 gig. Your processor can be Core i3 or Core i5 will be fine at minimum. And then be sure that you have a very good internet system. And all this will help for those of us who actually have not installed this. But if you have, that's fine. But if you have not, then by tomorrow you get to do that. So please get your system all set so that it can guide you with the installation. And then the lab will analyze and give cases and answer to questions about them. A lot of you have done that, but if you haven't, it's no problem. We'll make that available. So here quickly, let's look at the threat actors. Who are the threat actors? The threat actors are individual or groups who perform cyber attacks. They include and not limited to the amateurs, the activists, the organized crime groups, the state-sponsored groups, the terrorist groups. These are the different threat actors we have. And then cyber attacks are actually intentional malicious acts meant to negatively impact another individual or organizations. If you look at all these threat actors, they played a very strong role when it comes to some cases organized crimes and all that. And this actually have been the threat right from time and even to this period we find ourselves, and then even the future to come. And a lot of organizations, a lot of countries actually have been victim when it comes to this set of threat actors. So here we can see who are the amateurs. They are actually known as the script kiddies and have little or no skills. Actually, this set of people download software, some kind of malicious software online, which are free. Remember, there are a lot of malicious software online made available by some hackers, some programmers, and just to kind of create some situation where making things difficult for people online. So they often use these existing tools or instructions found on the internet to launch attacks. Even though they use basic tools, the result can still be devastating because Remember some of these tools that are available and which are malicious. Just try them on the network to see how they work. So they're actually the amateurs, or what we call the script kiddies. Then the activists, who are they are hackers who publicly protest against a variety of potential and social ideas. They post articles and videos linking sensitive information. They also disrupt our web services with legit traffic and using what we call the denial of service, distributed denial of service. I want to believe a lot of us will have come across this term of DDoS. Uh, this actually has to do with the case of DOS, which is sending unsolicited packets, some kind of packets to a server just to congest that traffic and then make it so difficult for individual or organization to make use of such systems. So that's who the activists are. And then we have the financial gain. Much of the hacking activity consistently threatening our security is motivated by financial gain. Of course, most of these attacks actually has a lot to do with financial gain. And the cyber criminals want to gain access to bank accounts, personal data, and anything else they can leverage to generate cash flow and all that. And then we have a trade secret and global politics. At times, nation states hack other countries or interfere with their internal politics, which some of us we are aware of some of the challenges that countries have had when it comes to interfering with other nations' political scape. So often they may be interested in using cyberspace for industrial espionage. The theft of intellectual property can give a country a significant advantage in the international trade. And so these are some of the threat actors in this case, but majorly, like we said, most of all these threats actually targeted towards financial gain in some situation. So how secure is the Internet of Things? We're looking at the Internet of Things from the perspective of what the threat actors can do. The Internet of Things helps individuals connect things to improve their quality of life. Remember, IoT actually coming in at this point in the fourth industrial revolution made it possible in such a way that you have a lot of devices getting connected to the internet and then increasing the vulnerability space. Vulnerability space such that the hackers can be able to gain access through most of these devices. So many devices on the internet are not updated with the latest firmware. Some other devices were not even developed to be updated with patches. These two situations create opportunity for threat actors and security risks for the owners of these devices. You agree with me with the margins of the IoT. A lot of the IoT devices actually have a lot of limitations, a lot of vulnerabilities, which actually has been a very big problem. And here we're looking at how the difficulties in updating some of this firmware with these recent IoT devices have actually created that vulnerability space for hackers to be able to gain access to some of these important devices. So it's actually been a big problem. So the IoT for now has actually not gotten that full security do I say the full security immunity when it comes to threat. But of course, there's room for improvement. And so there's a lab which will enable you to research and analyze IoT applications and vulnerabilities, which I have been going through for some of us that have submitted these labs. Please, for your information, you have to do all the labs for you to get through this program. And all your labs, we have to go through them, be sure that you actually did justice to them. So our advice that we can start up immediately with the class. So as the class is going on, you begin to work on these labs. And then if you have issues, we will to see how we can assist. The threat impact. And so look at the threat impact in the case of personally identifiable information. This is any information that can be used to positively identify individuals. For example, name and social security number, birthday, credit card numbers, etc. This is what we refer to as the PII. And in this case, the cyber criminal aim obtain this list of PII that can then be sold on the dark web, for some kind of attack. Stolen PII can be used to create fake financial accounts, such as credit card and for short-term loans. And also the medical community creates and maintains electronic medical records and contain protected health information as a subset of the PII. And then the personal security information, with the PSI, is another type of the PII. Of course, the PII is the personally identifiable information, and then includes your username, your password, your security-related information that individuals use to access information or services or the network. So this is actually a very great impact when it comes to threat. Once this record is actually assessed, they're actually being used and then made available. And some of these hackers, or we call it threat actors, have a way of getting this record and then made them available. In some cases, they could even take a loan on your behalf, and then you see yourself paying for such. Remember, some of these loans can be gotten directly online through banks and all that. So once your data, your vital information have been obtained, they can use this to siphon a lot of resources from legit users. Lost competitive advantage. The loss of intellectual property to competitors is a serious concern. An additional major concern is the loss of trust that comes when a company is unable to protect its customers' personal data. This is a very big issue because you have to provide a lot of security apparatus to be able to protect that company's data. The loss of competitive advantage may come from this loss of trust rather than another company or our country stealing trade secrets. So you agree with me that the loss of competitive advantage, once you've lost some kind of trust in terms of your record being made exposed to hackers. So we also look at another impact is in case of politics and national security. It is not just business that gets hacked. We also have state-supported hacker warriors can cause disruption of vital services and resources within an enemy nation. So the internet has become essential as a medium for commercial and financial activities. And this disruption of these activities can devastate a nation's economy. Remember, a lot of things are converging on the internet. So the internet is becoming a platform where so many things are happening, which now begin to dictate how we live, how we play, and how we carry out our activities on a daily basis. And so you can imagine if that platform is hacked. And that's the reason why we're here to make justice to this cause. And I want to believe that at the end of this cause, everyone here will be able to pass through and be able to do the right thing. And with this, you can be able to move on after the CCNA CyberOps Associate to the professional level. And so the lab, we're going to look at visualizing the black hat. In this case, you'll research and analyze cybersecurity incidents to create scenarios highlighting how organization can prevent or mitigate an attack. Those of you that have done this lab, you agree with me that you have to do a lot of research work. In other words, go online, find out one or two information with regards to this, just to give you a better insight. And so you recall also that you have the black hat, you have the gray hat, and then the black hat. All these are just for you to do some research on that. So that's for the module 1. This is more or less like an intro to this course. So we're looking at the danger, we're looking at the threat actors, we've looked at the impact of what this could be. And so before I move on to that's module 2, chapter 2 of this course, I would like to pause at this point to see if there are questions on some consign before we move on. Is there any question, or I should go ahead? Remember, this is being recorded and the recording will be made available at the end of every class. So for every time we meet, we're going to have make sure it is recorded and then make the recording available. Is there any question? I hope we can hear me. Can we hear me, please?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
Oh, thank you very
we
much.
can.
So any question, please?
Yes, we can hear you, right?
Can hear you.
Thank you very much, Coyote. Okay, so if there's no question, then I'll move ahead with the second chapter. Okay. So we go straight. And I want to believe every one of us here have actually, we can access the material online using our account. Is anyone here who has not been able to do that? Because you're meant to actually access this directly in your account. Is anyone here? Hello?
Aye.
Yeah, is anyone here who have not able to access the material online?
Who have not done what?
I mean, you're able to access the material online. The curriculum is online. Once you log in, you're able to access all the material. So
Of course, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, of
I've
course.
not. Except the one you send on us on the WhatsApp, I've not downloaded. Maybe I will do that before next lecture.
Okay, so what I actually sent to the WhatsApp group is actually the labs you're meant to do, in which, like I said, from 60%, about 60 to 70% of your assessment for this program. So until you get all the labs done, you might not be able to skate through. So every one of us have to get the lab done. So it's better you can start doing the labs now. Like those ones that you have to do some research, you get to do those research so that and then making sure you have a very good system in place for tomorrow. We're going to get the virtual box installed. We're going to install our cyber workstation and possibly the security onion, at least for now. So we get into everything we need to use as practical for this course. I'll be able to showcase them tomorrow for us. And please make sure you have a good system. I remember during the orientation, some of us complained that we don't have a good functional system. So I want to believe all that has been rectified, and then you're good to go. And remember, you must have a good internet system to be able to go along so that you will not leave you behind. And that's the excess of this program. And you have a lot to do here. And so if you can see my screen, this is module 2. Module 2 has to do with fighters in the war against cybercrime. And under this particular module, our objective actually would be to look at the mission of the Security Operations Center. Remember, on the network, you have the Network Operation Center, but here we'll be looking at the Security Operations Center, just the same way you have for your NOC. And then becoming a defender, we're going to look at how to describe resources available to prepare for a career in cybersecurity operations. For those of us who are looking at this as a core career to go into, we need to look at the resources that are actually available. So the Modern Security Operations Center, remember we're looking at what is the real operation of a security center. How do we set up a security center? What is the requirement? Just like for every network operation center, you agree with me that majorly what you see is the convergence of your router, your cable system, your switches, your firewall, you have your EURAG and all that. Now, all that you have set up with your monitoring system from your NOC. So in this case, for a security operations center, we need to begin to look at what do we really need to put in place? What is the knowledge required for you to become a cybersecurity professional? So to use a formalized, structured, and disciplined approach for defending against the cyber threat, organization must use services of professional firm from a security operation center. So what is SOC in this case? So we'll be referring to the Cybersecurity Operations Center as SOCs. It provides a broad range of services from monitoring, management to comprehensive threat solutions and customized host security. So majorly this is what you do, what the SOCs provide. It has to do with monitoring, management, how it's been managed, comprehensive threat solution, and customized hosted security. So the source can wholly in a house owned, operated by a business, or elements of the SOC can be contracted out to security vendors, just such as Cisco managed security services. And so it could be owned in-house, or it could also be outsourced or contracted out. And so the SOCs assign job roles. Let's look at the job roles here of the SOCs. Remember, the SOCs is Security Operations Center. The first one is the tier one, which are the what we call referred to as an alert analyst. And what do they do? What are the responsibilities of the alert analyst? They monitor incoming alerts. Alert we're talking about is in terms of threat, in terms of some kind of some kind of attack. Sometimes it could be positive, negative, negative, positive, and all that. So they monitor this, they verify that a true incident has occurred, and then forward tickets to tier 2 in some cases, if needed. Remember, like we said here, is that they do monitoring of the incoming alert. So you can see that this is actually structured in 3 tiers, and the 4th one is the manager. So meaning that you can fall in either of this category at every point in time. And the tier 2 is the incident responder. And here is responsible for deep investigation of incident and advise some kind of remediation or action to be taken. So the first one is to monitor, and the second one is to come up with remediations on what kind of action to be taken. And then the 3rd tier is a threat hunter. And here, what happened, the expert in the network endpoint has to do with threat intelligence, malware reverse engineering, tracing the process of the malware to determine its impact and how it can actually be removed from the network or from the platform. They're also deeply involved in hunting for potential threats and implementing threat detection tools. The threat hunters search for cyber threats that are present in the network that have not yet been detected. So you can see here that the threat hunter actually, they go after, you know what a real hunter needs to do. A real hunter needs to go out there to hunt for the prey. So in this case, before any damage is done, you are doing this to make sure that you get down on every threat before it causes any harm on the system, on the network. So the Security Operations Center manager, what does he do? He manages all the resources of the SOC and services as the point of contact for the large organization or customers. So the job of the manager is to make sure that all the resources that is required for the larger organization is being managed. So that means everything that is needed by the SOC is made available. And that is the job of the SOC manager. The SOC manager also needs to have a deep, in-depth understanding of the job role of the 1st tier, 2nd tier, and the tier 3 in this case. Because for him to be able to manage, for he or she to be able to manage all the resources, then he has to have a very good understanding of each of these responsibilities to be able to carry out that function. And so who are the people in the SOC? So from what you can see before you on your right, you can see the role, the frontliners. You can see for the tier 1 analyst, analyst. That's the level 1, and then you have the level 2, and then you have the level 3, and then the SOC manager. So this is a summary of the first tier, second tier, and the third tier. And then the first tier jobs are more entry level, while the third tier jobs require extensive expertise, because that is where you go after this threat. You detect this threat even before they cause any damage, meaning that you have to be ahead of them. You can look at it even in the real case scenario. Sometimes you have very high detective experts in the real world. Even before any attack is being launched, they're able to climb down the criminals. And that's exactly the same thing that is expected of the threat. That's the tier 3, which is the hunters. They make sure that they go ahead to get to track down every attack even before it happens, meaning that you have to do a lot of monitoring, you have to do a lot of reverse engineering to make sure that you counter such attack. And so the process in the SOC, a cybersecurity analyst is required to monitor security alerts, like I said, and queues and investigate the assigned alert. He also do what a ticketing system is used to assign this alert to the analyst queue. So the roles of people in the security operations center, as you can see to your right here, from the tier 3, tier 2 to tier 1. This is just to give us a summary of what is required, the rules that is required. You can see from 1, he monitors, open the ticket. Tier 2, he does investigation and advises remediation of what to be done. And then in tier 3, he carries out some preventive measures, and then of course must have an in-depth knowledge of likelihood of what might happen, and then find a way to reverse that whole process. And so here we look at the technologies in the SOC. The SOC needs a security information and event management system actually to understand the data firewalls, network appliance, intrusion detection system, and other devices. So this is what actually is needed. This is technology needed by the SOC to be able to actually carry out these processes. So the SIEM actually is a system that collects and filters data. It detects, classify, analyze, and investigate threats. They may also manage resources to implement what we call the preventive measures and addresses future threats. So you can see from your right here, this is a SOC monitoring system, which we now referred as the information and event management. So you need all these to be able to the SOC actually need this to be able to carry out a very formidable process. So first, the network traffic, the network flows, system logs, the endpoint data, the intel threat feed, security event, and then identify asset content. So you can see the security information event management system like a funnel. And all this actually is needed by the SOC. So SOC needs this to be able to carry out the first tier, second tier, and the third tier activities in ensuring that you have a formidable security setup. So still on technologies in the SOC, the SIEM and the security orchestration, automation, and response are often paired together as they have capabilities that complement each other. And so this is just to complement on the SIEM. So the large security operations center team use the technologies to optimize their SOC. When we talk about optimization, we're talking about to enrich and make it more formidable. And so some platforms are similar to SIEMs as they aggregate and correlate and analyze alert, in addition to SOC technology, which integrate threat intelligence and automated incident investigation and response workflow based on playbooks developed by the security team. So you can see what the SOC does here, which is the security orchestration, automation, and response. One, they create a customized platform that integrates and coordinates numerous security tools and resources. And for the automation, it actually executes security processes with a minimal amount of human intervention, meaning that it's automated, and then help address the shortage in cybersecurity analyst talent. So this is more of another way of automating the processes so that you don't keep humans trying to carry out this whole intervention. So you would do this is another way of saying why you rest or you relax on the job. You have a process that is running to help you carry out the monitoring. And for the response, this prescribe and execute security procedures to be followed in response to security event and can be used in the form of security runbook. So this is more of a prescribed processes of ensuring that this whole sequence of activities that is meant to be carried out is being launched to create an address and specific types of event. This is just to help you to be able to make sure that all that is automated is actually carried out in sequential order. And so the source security platform, one, it gather alarm data from each component of the system, provide tools that enable, remember we talk about the alarm, we're talking about either the false alarm or the false negative alarm or the negative false alarm. All those alarms actually collected, and provide tools that enable cases to be researched, assessed, and actually investigated. Emphasize integration as a means of automating complex incident response workflows, and then enable more rapid response, adaptive response strategies. It also helps to predefine your playbooks that enable automatic response to specific threats. And the playbook can be initiated automatically based on predefined rules or may be triggered by your security personnel. So this actually helps to look at the responses in terms of the threat, and then look at it in terms of the severity of the signal. So the SOC metrics. The SOC metrics. For SOC metrics, we need to look at one, the dwell time, the mean time to detect, the mean time to respond, the mean time to contain that whole threat, and then the time to control. So whether internal to an organization or providing services to multiple organizations, it's important to understand how well the SOC is actually functioning. So many metrics or key performance indicators can be developed to measure the different aspects of SOC performance. So how do we do that? We talked about how you can actually measure the performance of your SOC. For you to be able to tell if your security operations center is doing well or not. So what are the measures? What are the parameters? And that's what we refer to here as the metrics. The first one is dwell time. This is the time that the threat actors have access to a network before they are detected and their access is stopped. Remember, if a threat actor gets into your network, they don't just attack immediately. It takes a while for them to be able to gain access to some vulnerability. For instance, if a threat actor uses Wireshark to connect to your network, the threat actor has to take his time to monitor the traffic and see where all the traffic are turning to. He needs to know where the server is. That's the main container. In this case, the container is where everybody is pointing to. And of course, it takes time for him to be able to see all that and see the kind of TCP headers and the UDP and all that to be able to tell what kind of packet is being transmitted. And if he's doing that, we're saying that time. Can you mute your system, please? Hello. And so it requires a lot of some time to do that. Of course, when a criminal wants to get into your house, you agree with me that the criminal can't just jump in and then knows where you kept your money. No, he needs to come in and take his time to be able to explore all that. And so we say that's a dwell time. So that time that the actors have to access the network before they detect and then their access is being stopped is referred to as the dwell time. Then the mean time to detect is the average time it takes for the SOC personnel, that's the expert in this case, the analyst, to identify valid security incidents that have occurred in the network. So how long does it take? The valid security incident has occurred. Of course, there's an average time for that. So we refer to that as the mean time to detect. And then the mean time to respond is the average time it actually takes to stop and remediate a security incident, to be able to kind of reverse or stop that whole attack. It's referred to as the mean time to respond. Then the mean time to contain is the time required to stop the incident from causing further damage to systems or data. So time to control. So the time required to stop the spread of malware in the network is referred to as a time to control. And here we look at the enterprise and manager security. For medium and large networks, the organization will benefit from implementing an enterprise level SOC, which actually is a complete in-house solution. Larger organizations may outsource at least a part of the SOC's operations to security solutions provider. What they do is that they outsource the part and to experts to be able to provide some top level security for them. Cisco offers a wide range of incident response, preparedness and management capabilities, and which includes the Cisco Smart Net Total Care Service for rapid problem resolution. Cisco also provides security incident response team. Cisco also have what we call Cisco Computer Security Incident Response Team. Cisco Managed Services. This is actually a wide range of responses provided by Cisco. It has all these capabilities. And they also have the Cisco Safety and Physical Security program. All these are what Cisco have to be able to help fight against the cybercrime. So let's look at the security versus availability. Remember, one thing is to secure a system. Another thing is to make sure there's availability. If you just imagine your house where you stay, if you so much provide a very high-end security for yourself, it gets to a point where you can't come out of the house. And then once you cannot come out and you cannot be able to do anything outside there, it means that you're not available, And once you're not available, of what good is the house to you when you cannot be assessed or you can't be able to assess anything outside? So it means that while you try to build a security layer around yourself, around your resources, around your sensitive information or sensitive infrastructure, what you're saying is that you also make sure it's available. So security personnel understand that for the organization to accomplish this priority, the network availability must be preserved. So each business or industry has a limited tolerance for network downtime. That tolerance is usually based upon the comparison of the cost of the downtime in relation to the cost of ensuring against downtime. And then the security cannot be strong that interferes with the needs of employees or business functions. So you don't put too much security in place that your personnel, your staff cannot be able to do anything on the network. End up frustrating everybody, all because you have set up a very strong security apparatus. Some of us go to the extent of creating a lot of configurations here and there and makes it so difficult for personnel to be able to do their job. So it's also a trade-off between strong security and permitting efficient business functioning. So becoming a defender, what does it require to become a defender? In this case, a variety of cybersecurity applications are actually very relevant to careers in SOCs, and these are available. One is a Cisco certified CyberOps associate, which a number of us are here doing this currently. Some of us are already certified, possibly. If you haven't, we also say that at the end of this course, you get certified. It's part of some of the tasks I give to myself to say that after training instructors like this, I take it to another level to say that instructors also get certified, please. So once this program is concluded, I would like to see as many of us that will make contentious effort to get certified. I mean, the industrial certification. So not just only become an instructor, but also to be certified instructors. So you need to go the extra mile. So I can provide some kind of top level support to see that you get to that level. So CompTIA cybersecurity analyst and certification. And then we have the information security certifications, global information assurance certifications, and search for cybersecurity certifications on the internet to know more about other vendor and vendor neutral certifications. So what we're saying is that for you to be a defender, a complete defender, for you to be a complete cybersecurity expert, you don't just only depend on these, but you try as much as possible to see how you can gain certification from other vendors, all because all these are different subsets of platforms that exist on the network. So you need to have a very good in-depth understanding of their environment and then get certified in it. So by the time you aggregate all these certifications together, it makes you the very expert that you really want to be. And so there are further educations that is required, having a degree in related field, in computer science, some related programs. And then Python programming skills are actually very important and is needed also to able to enhance your skill. And Linux skills. So Linux is widely used in SOCs and all their networking and security environment. The Linux skills are available, a valuable addition to your skill set as you work to develop a career in cybersecurity. So you actually need these skills. They help further or advance your knowledge in this area. The good news here is that for the Python programming, is self-paced, is actually there for skill for all, so you can actually access this directly free. It's actually self-paced. You can access it right now even under your account. And then the Linux skills too also have Linux courses which are completely independent of this course. So I advise that you work through that. And then sources of career information. A variety of website, mobile applications, advertise information technology jobs. Each site actually target a variety of jobs that are available. So many sites are job site aggregators that gather listing. Example, we have a site like Indeed.com, CareerBuilder.com, USA Jobs. All these are actually sites. You need to know all these so that when you're teaching your students, you make them know that there are sites that can help them gain a job place. And so getting experience through internship, through scholarship and award, through temporary agencies, and then your first job, of course, on the job experience as well. And so with becoming a defender, you will research and analyze what it takes to become a network defender, meaning that you do a very good research in this. Remember, on the lab, we already have if you look at your lab manual, there are places where you provide all this information. So you can actually type them there directly and then send to me. So you could do your own research in that area and then you pass it across. So at this point, I'm going to pause and then give us the opportunity to ask questions. You can make some contribution where necessary, and then we can move on. Any question? Any question you want to ask? Hello, are we there?
We are there. We are there.
Yes,
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
sir.
we are.
yeah, lovely, lovely.
Yes, we are. Thank
So
you.
do you have any question to ask?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If you don't ask questions, I'll start asking questions myself. Asking us questions. Yeah.
We
Go
have.
ahead.
We
please.
have.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Can I start, Doctor?
Yeah, please go ahead. Who is speaking, please?
This is Submissive Akumbom speaking.
Who? Okay.
Akumbom.
Am I saying that? Okay, Akombo. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. What it takes to become a professional in a cyber ops professional? Cisco also offers, tracks in security.
Okay.
So I would like to know how the two complement each other. For example, if I'm following a training in CCIE security, CCNP security, for example, and a track in cyber ops, where do they converge and where do they diverge?
If I get you clearly, you're talking about the various certifications in
there are two. I'm talking about two tracks specifically. This
okay,
track,
go ahead.
track we are currently on, called CyberOps, cyber operations.
Yeah, the CCNA CyberOps Associate. Yeah.
There is also the security track. So do they complement each other?
Okay, are you talking about like the CCNA security?
Yes, for example.
Oh, lovely. Yes, there's some connect for the CCNA security. If you've actually, I don't know if you've done that before. If you have, you realize that CCNA security has a lot to do with devices. You'll be doing more on a lot of inspections on the devices, like for instance, the file system, the routers, the switches. You'll be doing a lot of configuration. That was prior before the CCNA CyberOps. But if you look at the CCNA CyberOps, obviously has a lot to do with, as the associate, has a lot to do with you doing more or less analyzing, monitoring, and all that. And all this require a third level, maybe applications for you to carry out those monitoring. But if you recall, the CCNA security, because the CCNA security long existed before the CCNA CyberOps Associate. So if you agree with me on that, you realize that you're actually doing a lot with the appliances directly. But in this case, under the CCNA CyberOps Associate, you're not doing much on the appliances directly. I'm talking about the routers, the switches, no. You just need to have some introductory level knowledge on network. That's why we really advise that you have your CCNA 1 and 2, and that actually helps you to go along. So if you look at this course, probably if you follow through to the end of this course, you realize that we're actually looking at how you use your cyber workstations as your Linux to actually do a lot of monitoring. You use your your security onion to carry out the different measures on how to look at the different alerts and look at how to trace this attack and all that. And that actually happens at a different level, which is like more or less on the application level of whatever you're doing. But for the CCNA track is actually more on the appliances. How do you use routers to be able to create some policy, do some configurations to be able to mitigate against some kind of attack and all that. So it's actually based on, for the CCNA security track, they were based more on appliances. So they were device specific. But in the case of the CCNA CyberOps, you're seeing here that it requires some third level applications to help you to be able to carry out this monitoring. Of course, these applications are actually embedded in certain devices which are hardware based, but you're doing more monitoring. That's why if you look at it critically, this does not require an in-depth knowledge, so much knowledge on the complete CCNA track. Rather, it's just an introductory aspect of it, where you learn what network is, that's network essentials, and then you come in to gain some level knowledge on probably IP addressing, MAC address, and all that. And so that you can be able to tell whether an attack is internal or external and all that. So the knowledge you just need for the CyberOps is just to give you just a kind of a background knowledge on networks. And then the next thing, you're using applications, you're using some kind of software to do monitoring and all that. So you could see there's a divide, there's a kind of but if you have this is where they meet. If you have a very good knowledge on CCNA security, probably at the CCI level, you realize that that knowledge helps you to be able to manage, to optimize the security architecture of your entire network. And then when you're also good with CCNA CyberOps from the associate to the expert level, it helps you to be able to balance those applications where all the services run under. So meaning that from the hardware vendor specific, you're good at securing these devices. And then to also, at the other side of using maybe like we recall, we see the SOCs is divided into 3, 4 thereabouts, the first tier, second tier. If you look at the activities of what they do, they analyze, they try to carry out remediations, try to see how they can counter some attacks and all that. All those things you do is more of monitoring. It's more of trying to, so you're not actually using the hardcore devices, there's the router switches or that to do all that. But you're actually looking at how most of the services that run on the network, you can be able to see how you can carry out. So if you look at it critically, you also realize that there are some attack that comes directly on through the equipment, but that is not actually captured here. And that is why your knowledge from the boat helps you to convert at the point, because what you're trying to do here is that you're trying to protect the entire network. And so if you must protect the entire network, you must actually know how to optimize your security knowledge on the hardware of the system itself that you have in the organization. And then you must also be good at making sure in terms of the cloud, which is the internet now, how do you monitor activities on the cloud, on the internet? That is where the CyberOps comes in, and that is where that knowledge is actually needed. So bringing the two together makes you a complete expert in that direction. And if you look at towards the end of this particular chapter, we said it's not only that you have this knowledge in security in Cisco, you also need to look at other vendors, what the other vendors also bring to the table. Look at it, you have to have some knowledge in CompTIA, cybersecurity. You have to look at information security certifications. Some of these certifications you're seeing here, they're not actually directly under Cisco. In the case of CompTIA, it's not Cisco. So meaning that for you to actually gain a very good experience, or for you to be able to be the expert that is actually sought for or needed to provide 100%, or do I say close to that security for any organization, you must go all the way to look at other vendors and get certified in those areas. But going specifically to by your question, actually the two of them are separate, but they meet at a point in the sense that you're actually protecting the enterprise network. And if you have a hardware security knowledge, that's excellent. And if you're also good in terms of using these specialized tools, because we can see what we're talking about, these are tools. And these tools, most of them run on appliances, of course, to make it a holistic solution that you have to deploy on that network. So it's good you have the two knowledge. It will help to solidify your understanding and make you a better cybersecurity professional, as the case may be. I hope I actually answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, Doc.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I can see another hand from Kueku.
My quick question: how different is the ops certification tracks from the other security tracks, CCNA security, CCNP current security, and all the way. Are there overlaps, or they're totally two different tracks of certification and leading to completely two different world of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think your question is related to the question the last speaker actually put across. They're actually running independently, but of course, there's a convergence, there's a point where they meet. If you look at the way the technology is evolving, at some point, the network is also going software defined. And so meaning that here we are at some point where everything was typically hardware based and provide a very high efficient way of doing things. And then here where we are, where software is beginning to take the place and all that. And so, of course, this is running independent from this, but at some point in the nearest future as we go, there's going to be a convergence. There's going to be a convergence because everything is almost going software defined. And so the CCNA security has actually been there for, I mean, on that track, on that particular lineup, right from the word go. And that Cisco had maintained. But then you can see the CCNA CyberOps is coming in because so many things are actually happening and a lot of activities are happening, and that you need a lot of software solutions to help manage all the strength and all that. And that is actually telling you that, well, we can't just 100% depend on this hardware to provide 100% security. We also need to go as far as having some new security way of doing it. And that's where the Linux comes in. You agree with me that it's actually most of this iOS is run on Linux. And that tells you that the best thing is to begin to provide the security architecture right from that very platform. And so that's why you need to get some programming skills. And so that everything you need to do, you begin to write your own script, you begin to see how best you can secure the network and all that. So if you look at it, it's because it's going software defined. And that's the reason why we're having this happening at the right-hand side with the CyberOps, and then the left-hand side, if you classify that in that order, you agree with me that the CCNA security, the CCNP security have actually been on the equipment specific when it comes to Cisco. But then there are two independent stuff. But like I said, in the future, there's bound to be a convergence because software is taking the world. And when it comes to that, it means that you just have to get there into the entire device and carry out your security solution yourself. And that's exactly what is happening with the CCNA CyberOps.
Thank you so much. That was deep.
Yeah. Okay. So any question? Any other question? And then we'll move ahead. Okay, so there's no question, and then I'll pause at this point. Yeah. Okay. So please also note that the assessment is activated for those of you who wish to take this assessment. You can be doing that, and then we actually make sure that it is it's activated so you can take it as many times as possible, because the essence of this is to make sure you know what you're doing. So if you have you're not doing well, you can still go back and retake it on and on and like that. So any other question, and then we move ahead. So we'll be actually going to model 3, which is a Windows operating system.
Yeah, Dr. Daniel.
Yeah, please go ahead, please.
Yeah, good evening. So I had
Yeah,
a challenge. I think I've emailed you concerning the assessment.
Yeah, what happened to your assessment,
Hello?
Peter? Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So I tried my hands, I read through once and then I tried my hands on the assessment and I had a low average grade. So I wanted to know if, let's say, I can retake the assessment again.
Sure, you can. You can retake it as many times as possible.
Okay.
Mm.
Because I realized from my portal, I wasn't able to retake the assessment. So
Oh,
I
really?
wanted to verify. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to check that again. I'll double check on it. But for real, you should be able to take the assessment
Okay.
as many times
Thank you
as
very much.
possible. Yeah. And
Okay.
with the labs, we're able to have access to the labs as well. Please make sure you have access to the labs.
Okay. Okay. So anytime I face difficulty with the labs, I'll give you a feedback, because the network is worrying some of us over here, especially with the security onion download. I've been trying my hands since last week, but then I've not been able to finish downloading it.
Wow. How best do we do this? I already have it here, but then even when I share it on Google Drive, it still requires you to download it. So I think it would be best to see when you're sure you have a very good internet speed so that you can download it.
Sure.
Is anyone here who can assist with that? But I think you just have to download it from your end.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Doctor, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
My name is Mary from Ocean State.
Okay, Mary.
Yes, sir. I want clarification because of the lab things. I really don't understand. Is it I don't understand the lab things you said we should submit. I don't really understand it. Is it the one we are downloading, like the security onion, all the virtual machines? Are those the labs?
Are you in the WhatsApp group?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, what I did was to download the resources for the labs, and actually, I don't know how many of us are able to cite that. How many of you have seen the student version of the labs? Is anyone here that have seen that? I actually posted it to the WhatsApp group so that you can download it possibly when you walk through. Okay, let me just a minute, please, so I can show us what it looks like. And then I'll repost it again, because why you need that is, as the class is going on, once in a while, I'll pause, bring up the labs, and then we'll work together, and then we move on. But it's actually also your responsibility to walk through all the labs and make sure that you get them done. So I'll be doing some of the labs, and some of them you'll be working on them. But if you have challenges with the labs, you can feel free to let me know. Actually, we have a lot of labs to do. But some of the labs actually are related, some kind of repetition. So once I get done with one or two that are related, I'll expect you to do the others. So I don't know how many of us actually have seen the labs. Let me see, I can bring that up quickly. Have we all seen the labs, please?
Seen it.
Hello.
Okay. Just few of us, right?
Actually, Doctor, if we are reading the course material from our portal, the labs are embedded in the course material.
Exactly.
As we walk through, we get to a stage, they say, this is the lab, we download it in PDF.
Good.
Yes. So if we have access to our portal, we shouldn't have any challenge accessing the labs.
Yeah, but I believe everyone here is you already have access to the portal. Is anybody here who doesn't have access to the portal?
Actually, maybe my colleague maybe should be advised that inside the course material from her portal, at various stages, she will see the lab that has to be downloaded and then answered and then be submitted to the trainer.
Yeah, I need to. Is anyone here who could just log into your account and share your account so others could just see how you access it? My own account is the instructor account. I just want somebody who is anybody here who could just volunteer. You just log in, share, and then show at least.
Let me volunteer, Doctor.
So what I could do is like what I did here was to download all the labs and then posted them here so that you can actually see what you need to do for the entire program. So you can plan your day. So you can go ahead and share yours, please.
Okay. So share my screen.
Yeah, so you can see how you can access it.
So if I understand, Doctor, we have some labs as a homework, or we will do all labs together?
Yeah, you just have to work on the lab as you go on with the course, but you can still be ahead if you think you're fine. You can be doing, it's allowed. You can be doing the labs, and then but if you have any difficulty, you can just let me know. Okay, I think he just shared this. I'm going to actually show us again all the labs that we need to do. We'll walk through the labs because we just have to do this concurrently. Even when I teach, I need to also bring up the lab and then we do the lab. So meaning that for what we have done today, we'll be looking at the labs for this chapters or modules by tomorrow so that we can take that side by side. But like I said, it also would be in the interest of the students to do these labs themselves so that you don't just wait for me to do them and then you just relax. No, you also work on the labs. But it would be nice you get the platform set so that all the labs will be done on the platform. And that's exactly what I want to make available to us. Okay, fine. So he just logged into his account. So those of us who...
So as I go through, so
okay, fine.
Yeah, you see like here, this is a lab. I click open it, this is a PDF. So I download it, I answer. If I have to submit to the instructor, I submit. So these labs, yeah, so the labs are there embedded in green as we move through. We see each module, some modules have, this is how to install machines, cyber security cases. I download, yeah. So if we actually have access to our portals, we have access to all the labs.
Lovely.
Okay, now I get. They are the class activities. Now I get.
They're actually labs.
Okay.
I have one question, if you don't mind, Doctor.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thanks for sharing this with. I have only simple question. Can one do this? The portal itself, himself. Or should someone wait as per you goes, as per you take us?
You're asking how far do I go with the labs?
Yeah, this what hopefully you understood my question. For example, if I would like to do all these labs on my behalf, I can finish, some of them very quickly, within a 1 day. So is this fine? Is there any time factor? Oh.
No, the labs, of course, if some of us here already have, we just want to move ahead. It's fine. You can do that. For instance, let me see if I can share this. Okay.
In my case, actually, I am waiting for taking instruction from you. Should I continue? Can I continue the remaining side? Because it is very, the course is well embedded. One can go step by step and can complete even assessment like this. So are we free to go, or should we wait for the right time to take instruction from you?
No, you're free to go. I wouldn't want to keep you waiting. There's so much for us to do. If you have the time to go ahead and do what you need to do, you can go ahead and do it. But you have to be in class, so when there are questions, you respond to them. If there are things you need to get clarification, all fine. So, but then if you know you can do the labs, why not? You try your hands on it. We are all instructors, and I'm here to make sure that, actually, for those who are just joining us who probably don't have any experience, they need to look at that. So if you open, I think I just reposted it again. You can see for chapter 1, you have 1.0.6, you have 1.1.5, you have 1.1.6, and up till 1.3.4. And so that's why I said installing the virtual machine, which I'm going to demonstrate, cybersecurity case studies, learning the details of attacks, visualizing the black hats, becoming a defender. These are the labs that are required. Apart from installing the virtual machine and then installing the server workstation, every other thing you see here are more or less like research. So it means like he just demonstrated. You can read, you do it. So, and that's why what I try to do is that I'll give us some kind of timeline to submit every chapter. And so that at the end of this program, you'll have submitted everything. So meaning that this week now, all the students or the instructors must make sure you finish chapter 1, 2, and 3. So if you have submitted your chapter 1, you're fine. And if you have not submitted, then you know that you have a lot of work to do for chapter 1, 2, and 3. So if you're reading at your pace that you're going, make sure that that pace that you're going is at the same pace with what I'm doing. Because right now I've done the module 1, I've done the module 2, and so there are labs to do in this 1 and 2. So the question is that, have you done them? Are you having difficulties? What are your difficulties? Those difficulties, you need to bring them to the class so that we look at it together. And if you want to go ahead with chapter 3, you can go ahead and do chapter 3. So once I say submit, you send them to me. If you of course, like I said, you can create a folder. In each, you need to have a folder, and each folder you have a subfolder to address for every chapter. So at the end of this course, you zipped all the folder. You zip that folder that contains all the modules, as the case may be, and then you send them to me. So my job is, like now, I have created a spreadsheet already for all the instructors so far, those who have submitted, and I'm already taking like a kind of a checklist, and to say, okay, he submitted chapter module 1, he has submitted module 2. So at the end of the day, I know those who have completed. So if I'm giving the grade for that particular labs, then I give you all the grades as required. And if I have some consign, I have to call your attention, and then you have to make some clarification if there's need for that. But
thank you for clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, so every instructors must make sure they do the labs. Yeah, and that's why you need to make sure you're good to go. If you don't do the labs, there's no way you can graduate from this room. Okay, so I hope there's no more question for that. I hope everybody's cleared in terms of how we're running this program. Meaning that you take the online assessment, you do your labs, and then you make sure you submit your labs and follow through for the week. What are your expectations for the week? So you know the expectation. So even the days we don't have classes, you can be working on the labs. And then if you have questions, you can private chat me with those questions, or you can come to the group and drop those questions. And those who who respond to that, fine, they can. If they cannot, then I will have to respond to that question and make sure you're fine. And so that for every week, we make justice to what we're supposed to cover. So at the end of the program, we're sure that we've done everything. Okay, so if I've answered the question, then I can go ahead. I hope she's okay now. Yep. Are you okay? Hello? Okay. So I'm going to introduce Model 3, which is a Windows operating system. For Windows, we're going to look at the hands-on lab. So that means we have labs to do here. And what are we expected here to do? We design for working with physical equipment. And then the class activities has to found the instructor resources page. And then we look at check your understanding. There's a topic online quiz to help learners gauge content understanding. So this is the requirement for this, and then quickly we look at let me look at the objectives, and then we go on. Okay, so for the objectives, we actually need to look at the history of the Windows operating system, the architecture of Windows and its operation, and then configure and monitor Windows, explain how Windows can be kept secure. So the Windows history, the DIX operating system, which is the DOS, is an operating system that the computer uses to enable the data storage device to read and write. And then DOS actually provides a file system which organizes the files in a specific way. A lot of us can remember the DOS very well. And the MS-DOS created by Microsoft, which used the command line as an interface for people to create their program, manipulate the data, and then the DOS command shown in bold, as you can see to your right. And so with the MS-DOS, the computer had a basic working knowledge or accessing the disk drive and loading the operating system files directly from the disk as part of the boot process. So if it must load, it must call it up from the drive. Okay, and so the DIX operating system, so early version of Windows consisted of a graphical user interface that ran over MS-DOS, starting with Windows 1 up to in 1995. So you can see the trend of how far Windows have come. It's come a long way. It's in a newer version of Windows built on new technologies. The operating system itself is in direct control of the computer and its hardware. So today, many things that used to be accomplished through the command line interface of MS-DOS can be accomplished in Windows GUI. So the graphical user interface have actually made life and more easier rather than using the command line. So the MS-DOS command, like a directory, you can actually shows a list of all your files in the current directory. And the CD directory, you can actually change the directory to indicated directory, and then it changes directory to the directory of both the current directory. And so this is actually the MS-DOS command to your left. And this is a description of what you can actually do with this command to your right for Windows. The Windows version, like since 1993, has been more than 20 releases of Windows that are based on the NT operating system. So you can actually see, and then we also have the 64-bit address space instead of the 32-bit address space of your operating system. And then we have a 64-bit computers operating system, backward compatible with the 32-bit programs and all that. Now, I want to ask this question, please. I need to pause to be sure that a lot of us here. Is anyone who can give me or explain to me the difference between your 32-bit hardware operating, your 32-bit hardware system and your 64-bit? How does this two work? You have operating systems that are 32-bit, 64-bit. You also have systems that's hardware systems that are 64-bit and 32-bit. How do you draw the line? How does the two work together? Is anyone here who can explain that? Or we don't understand my question? Because here we're looking at the Windows version, and then we're looking at 64-bit and 32-bit. So is anyone here who can explain how the hardware system of 64-bit and 32-bit also work in line with the software? That's the Windows operating system. I see somebody raising his hand. Can you respond to that?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and training us very well. Maybe I can just try to explain the difference between 32-bit and 64-bit. Basically, for 32-bit architecture, the machines that support 32-bit, it means the path that connects the hard disk where the storage, where the operating system is stored, and the path or the lines that connect where the operating system is stored and the processor can push 32 bits at once, or the width the width of that bus is 32 bits. Kind of the instructions that can be executed from memory to by the processor when being loaded from the memory. It can load the pieces of files at per second that are of 32 capacity of 32 bits, whereas the 64-bit architecture supports double. The kind of files that can be fetched from memory and be taken to the processor, that the width of that bus can support 64 bits per second. So making 64 bits to be more faster than 32 bits. I don't know whether I'm correct, but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for that attempt. That's a very good one. Is anyone here actually who wants to make a contribution, or probably if you know you don't understand the explanation, you can also let me know. So, Kweko, you have something to say, and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, I'd like to add on what he said is actually right. The primary difference between the 32 and the 64-bit operating systems mostly lies on how they handle memories and the capabilities of the software and hardware that the computer can support. So the 32-bit, especially, they subscribe to a certain capacity in RAM. Usually it's 4, but the 64-bit operating system can handle a lot of RAM. And also the performance of each system also differ. The 32-bit operating systems are limited in their ability to perform certain tasks, while the 64-bit is more advanced and it supports more difficult to run software and so on. That goes on to driver support and the security of the different operating system. That's in summary what I could add.
Okay, I think that's excellent. That's good. Rollins, you have something to say. Go ahead.
Okay. I think the difference majorly is the amount of data that systems can process at a time. So 32-bit processes small amount of data and 64-bit processes larger amount of data. So that makes 64-bit faster in processing than the 32-bit.
Yeah, but we're trying. That's a good one. I think that's very valid contributions we've all made here. My question actually, some of you addressed it, some of you just it's look at the fourth explanation here. It says this is 4-bit computers and operating system are backward compatible with older. So the 32-bit programs, but 64-bit cannot be run on older 32-bit hardware. So you see here, now, if you're to explain this, looking at the 64-bit programs cannot, as we're looking at the 64-bit operating system now, cannot actually run on the 32-bit hardware architecture. From the explanation, you could see here that a 32-bit hardware is actually talking in terms of the processor itself. Remember the pathways, like the first speaker was trying to talk about. The pathway is the pathway in which data is being fetched, is being decoded and executed. So meaning that a 32-bit processor can only fetch data through 32-bit pathways and then execute that process. So in this case, if you have a 64-bit operating system, for instance, and you run it on a 32-bit, you're going to have some issues with that. And that's why my own question is to see your ability to be able to tell us what kind of operating system do we run on which hardware, because the hardware we're talking about is the processor itself in terms of fetching this information through the memory. You all made some very strong valid points here. The memory is needed. Remember, those memories where the data is being fetched from. So meaning that if it's fetching it from that pathway. And so you could see here, so I thought somebody was going to address why you have this operating system not running on this hardware and why you have this that it has to run, and then the backward compatibility. But then in summary of all is, it has to do, because sometimes you can have a 64-bit hardware processor and somebody runs a 32-bit operating system. The question is that, will it work? If I have a hardware architecture that is 64-bit and I run on an operating system that is 32-bit, will the 32-bit operating system run on a 64-bit hardware architecture? Is anyone that can answer that question? Or are we confused here? Yeah.
Yes, 32 can run 32-bit operating system or application can run on a 64-bit computer architecture. But a 64-bit application or operating system will have issues running on a computer architecture with 32-bit.
Yeah, so why does it have issues with that? And the reverse does not have issue. Yeah, I'm saying this because your student will ask you questions. So we are all instructors, and of course, it's my job to do justice to every explanation here. But at the same time, you also need to prepare yourself ahead, because we're preparing you as an instructor.
Yeah, we see that the operating system or the application was designed to use this 64-bit, to run. But now if we put it in an architecture that supports maximum 32, so it means, yes, some parts of it may not be loaded or being loaded with difficulty.
That's very correct. I hope the rest of us understood what he said. So it's just that way because you cannot be able to load that because of here you have the 32-bit. So it means that there are a number of pathways, or it can fetch this data. So if you begin to run that number of operating system on that hardware architecture, it's not going to work, no matter the applications and what it is. So you have to get the one that is compatible with it. But you can see here we said these 4-bit computers and operating system are actually backward compatible with older 32-bit programs. So that means you can have your 64-bit architecture and you can actually run this old one on it and it will work. And so you need to understand the thin line between your hardware architecture and the application software itself that you're running on it. So Microsoft has announced that Windows 10 is the last version of Windows. Rather than purchasing new operating system, users will justify Windows 10 instead. But of course, we have Windows 11. So this is still happening. There's still some kind of an upscale in that direction. And so here you have Windows 7, and because you have the Windows Server 2008. These are all Windows versions. I remember some actually are Windows for personal computer, and then you have the one for server for you to run other devices. And so you can agree with me that the server has more capabilities to take in more and more, because it's actually designed to handle high traffic in terms of activities as compared to your normal Windows operating system for personal computer. So here you can see the different OS and the version, as it were. Some of them we're used to them, we've used them in the past, and some of them actually are new. But if you can see from what we have here in the curriculum, of course, that tells you that there's a lot also. This is not the updated version. You have also Windows Server 2019 as well, and you have Windows 11. So all that we can update naturally, looking at the trend of the operating system. And so the Windows GUI, it has a graphical user interface for users to work with data files and software. The GUI has a main area that is known as a desktop. So you can see that the desktop can be customized with various colors, which you can do. Windows supports multiple users, and then users can customize their own desktop. So you can actually create accounts for different users. The desktop can store files, folders, shortcut locations, programs, and all that. A lot of us here, we use Windows, so we can attest to that and believe that you can do so much with Windows. And then mostly right-clicking on icon will bring up additional functions, which you can see when it comes to Windows. These are context menus for icons, for notification, and all that. And then operating system vulnerabilities. We have seen a lot talked about Windows, but let's look at why Windows are vulnerable. Are there vulnerabilities? Operating system consists of millions of lines of code. With all this code comes vulnerabilities. A vulnerability is in some flaw or weakness that can be exploited by an attacker to reduce the viability of a computer's information. So to take advantage of the operating system vulnerability, the attacker must use a technique or a tool to exploit the vulnerability. So the attacker can then use that vulnerability to get the computer to act in a fashion outside of its intended design. So in general, the goal is to gain unauthorized control of the computer and change permissions or to manipulate or steal data. So main thing is that because Windows has millions of codes and each of these actually creates a very high vulnerable space which attacker can actually use to launch some kind of attack. So the following tables list some common Windows as the OS security recommendations. 1, virus or malware protection. So by default, Windows uses Windows Defender for malware protection. You can agree with this. It has Windows Defender. Windows Defender provides a suite of protection tools built into the systems. So if Windows Defender is turned off, the systems actually becomes more vulnerable to attacks and malware. So meaning that you need to update your Windows Defender to actually help the patches. If there are new patches to help boost the immunity of your Windows operating system. So unknown or managed services. So there are many services that run behind the scenes. It's important to make sure that each service is identifiable and safe. So with an unknown service running in the background, the computer can be vulnerable to attack. So you need to know, you need to go through your processes to see all that is running and see if some of them that are running that are not actually meant to run, then you could be able to take some kind of measures to stop that processes. Encryption, when data is not encrypted, it can easily be gathered and exploited. So this is not important for desktop computers, but especially for mobile devices. So also look at security policy as part of recommendation. So a good security policy must be configured and followed. You have a lot of security policies, even in Windows. So all that has to must be configured and followed. Many settings in Windows security policy control can prevent attacks. We have labs for that, which we'll need to do. Firewall. So by default, Windows uses Windows Firewall to limit communication with devices on the network. But over time, rules may no longer apply. So it is important to review firewall settings periodically to ensure that the rules are still applicable and remove any that no longer apply. So you have inbuilt firewall, and then you have file and share permission. This permission must be set correctly. It's easy to give the everyone group full control. So you must check to be sure that you actually looking at who to permit, who not to permit, or everyone to access and all that. So all those measures must take in place. Weak or no password. Many people choose weak password or not use even a password at all. It's especially important to make sure that all accounts, especially the administrator account, have a very strong password. So login administrator, when a user log in as an administrator, any program that they run will have the privilege of that account, which of course you should know that. So it is best to log in as a standard user only use the administrator password to accomplish certain tasks. So these are actually operating systems vulnerabilities. So let's look at the Windows architecture and operations. Here is the abstraction layer. The hardware abstraction layer is a software that handles all the communication between the hardware and the kernel. The kernel is the core of the operating system and has control over the entire computer. So the kernel sits in between, more or less like a middleware between your operating system and your hardware. So the kernel handles all the input and output requests, memory, and all the peripherals connected to the computer. So the basic Windows architecture is actually shown in the figure. So you can see from the figure, you have the application, you have the user mode drivers, you have the Windows API, and then you have the kernel mode drivers. And then so you can see this is a typical Windows architecture and operations. And then you can see that the kernel actually provides that interface between the application and the hardware. And so the Windows file system. And so a file system is a way of organizing the information on storage media. And the following table lists the file systems supported by Windows. So you can see the expert. And what does the expert do under the Windows file system? This simple file system supports by many different operating systems. So the FAT has a limitation to the number of partition size, and the file size that it can actually address. So it is not usually used for hardware drivers or solid state drives anymore. So both your FAT16 and FAT32, these are more like legacy, available to use, with FAT32 being the most common as it has many fewer restrictions than FAT16. And then the hierarchical file system, this is the file system used on Mac OS computers and allows much longer file names, file size, and partition size. So although it is not supported by Windows without special software, Windows is able to read data from your hierarchical file system partition. So these are actually the different Windows file systems that we have. We also have the extended file system, and then we have the new technology file system, which is the NTFS. This is commonly used file system under the NTFS, and installing Windows, all versions of the Windows and Linux support your NTFS. But Mac OS computers can only read on NTFS partition. They are able to write to an NTFS partition after installing special drivers, meaning that they need special drivers for them to be able to write into the NTFS. So Windows file system, the NTFS formatting creates important structures on the disk for file storage and the tables for recording the locations of files. So you can see here, the one you have the partition boot sector. This is the first 16 sector of the drive. Remember, your drives actually have those stratas as the sectors where all this data are stored. So it contains the location of the master file table. The last 16 sectors contain a copy of your boot sector that's under the NTFS. So the master file table, which is the MFT, this table contains the location of all the files and directories on the partition, including your file attributes such as security information and then your timestamp. So you can see the different sectors in terms of the arrangement of the location of what you have when you use the NTFS. So for the system files, these are hidden files that store information about volumes and file attributes. And then your file area, the main area of the partition where files and directory actually are stored. So when formatting the partition, the previous data may still be recoverable because not all the data is completely removed. And I think a lot of us here will have experienced this. I remember an incident where somebody committed a crime and thought after formatting the system, they've lost all that. So you can see that you can recover this. How many of you believe that this happens? And how many of you actually have recovered data when it is formatted under the NTFS? Is anyone here who have experienced that? Nobody? Okay.
Partially, not totally.
He said partially. Were you able to do any recovery?
Yes, some data were able to recover, not all.
Yeah, you can recover, but you can recover a whole lot. You can recover because you can you can recover a whole lot, not all, like you said, not all, not all.
I also
Okay, so
experienced the same thing. Okay. That person recovered those information, some vital information. So that was when I got to know that unless they destroy the laptop, that's when information cannot be recovered unless they destroyed it. I was like, wow.
the laptop or the disk drive? Hello?
I think she still to me the hard disk drive.
Okay, I think she's referring to the disk drive, yeah. And you destroy the disk drive, but if you just format it, there's a higher chances you can still recover some of the information. Okay, so let's look at alternate, still on Windows, alternate data streams. NTFS store files as a series of attributes such as the name of the file or the timestamp. The data which the file contains is stored in the attribute data and is known as a data stream. So by using NTFS, alternate data streams can be connected to the file. So an attacker could store malicious code actually within the alternate data stream, and that can then be called from a different file. So in the NTFS file system, a file with an alternate data stream is identified after the file name and a colon. For example, the test file, the text ADS. This file name indicates an alternate data stream called ADS is associated with a file called the test file, the text. So you here, this is just to give us an analysis that in as much as the NTFS store files as a series of attributes, and this attribute that you can see here, an attacker can also store malicious code within the ADS. So we're looking at those vulnerabilities, those gaps that provide attackers to be able to also create. You know, one thing you look at here is they go after the vulnerability space, and once they're able to get that, of course. Another one of the ways, who can tell me what are the ways that you can tell if you have a program that is running and that is not actually running from a list of applications that you have in your system? Where can you check that to see if you have this program running? Is there any way you can check a program that is running and then you can tell whether it's running from your own set of applications or not? Hello?
Yes, you can.
Are we here?
Task manager, you can check.
Okay, so if you go to task manager, what do? You just click on task manager and then you see they're running.
Check the processing.
Okay, so once you go to the process, you see all that is running. So how do you now tell which is not? So if we stop that process at that point in time, does it stop completely? And can we remove those processes?
The task manager. The task manager.
Yes, we can remove it. We just stop the task.
Yeah, you see all applications running.
Hello, I can't hear you.
Yes, you can.
So how do you
Yes.
stop or you remove?
Program, sir.
You end process via the task manager.
So when you end the process via task manager, does it mean the next time you restart the system is not running again?
For processes that run automatically when you restart your PC, you can terminate them from the startup applications.
Yeah, you can terminate them for startup applications. And once you terminate them, does it still run?
No.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
They won't still run except you run them. Hello, can you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, so you can actually terminate it. You can actually stop it, but I'm only just saying that, of course, there are programs are running. So all this is just for monitoring. Of course, once there's some kind of an installation, a program, a malicious program that is running, you can always check it out there. We have labs that actually you could do here, but I know too well that the labs for this particular module, as for 3, you exploring processes and thread. So that should be 3 point. Dr. Salami, you have a question? That's 3 point. If you go to 3.2.2.11, you'll be exploring the processes and the thread. This particular lab, you won't be doing it on the VirtualBox. You'll be doing directly on your system to be able to check that and see how. Of course, if you can also load your operating system, if you have the iOS, you can also run it on the VirtualBox yourself too. And then we also have the one for Windows Task Manager, which you also need to do. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pause here if there are questions to ask. So that what I want to do is that I don't want to go too far. Let's do the installation tomorrow and make sure everybody have installed this of us. Please, before I go any further or end the section today, I want to ask the class, is there anyone who has not installed VirtualBox, or are there persons who have not? And if everyone has installed it, then we're good to go. Are there individuals here who have not installed the VirtualBox?
Yes, sir. I haven't, sir.
How many? Please, can you just raise your hand? Let me know if there's need for it. And there's no need, then we can. Okay, I just have one person. Okay, that's fine. So have a couple of persons here. Oh, good. Okay, good. So I'm going to pause it, and then we could do. Hello.
Hi. I wanted just to inquire. I have in my machine. I have installed VMware. I was whether VMware can suffice, because installing both of them.
No. If you have a VMware, you can use that. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr.
You're welcome. You can go ahead. And so we'll do the installation tomorrow, so that we can give everybody the opportunity to know how to get it installed at their cyber workstations, explore the cyber workstations, just walk around the environment, and then see how to add as many applications as possible. So from there, you can take it up from there. So every other practicals, the procedure for the practicals are also provided in the lab manuals. Of course, I've posted it to the group. I'm going to repost it again. I don't want to go too far with this explanation where we'll have a lot to do. So I want to be sure that everybody's on the same page. So I'll be doing more of the installation tomorrow to see that everybody on that page. And if I'm able to post it pre-recorded, that's fine. So we can watch it over and over and get it installed. And so at this point, I'll pause. If there are questions, you can answer those questions, and then we can move on. Please, you keep to the time. 4:30 p.m. GMT +1 is the time. and you fine tune that to your own local time and be sure that you're on stage. So once it's time, we'll start and then we end exactly the time. And so everyone will be sure that we're working with the time. So are there questions we can address before we leave? Please, for those of you who will be doing the installation, try to make sure you have your system working, minimum of 8 gig. Don't use a 4 gig system, please. Don't use old Pentium system. Make sure you have up-to-date system and then you have adequate space for it. If not, it will frustrate you. I don't think it will be a good one. Okay, so are there questions or concerns we need to look at before?
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I asked the question in the WhatsApp group concerning the duration of
lovely.
learning. Like, based on the how long are we supposed to spend for this? How many months or how many weeks, so that we can plan towards it?
The contact we have 3 contact days in every week. The way it's running is that as I'm teaching, you're meant to be doing the labs at the same time. So we have 4 weeks to go. The 4 weeks starts from this week. So meaning that we're meeting tomorrow, we're meeting next tomorrow, and we keep meeting till the 4th week. And so I'll have another 1 week to give to all of us to complete our assessment, which is like 5 weeks put together to round up this program. So what it means is that you have to be working around the clock too. So as I teach, I explain the practicals, you have to sit back and do all the practicals, and then we go on. So we're meant to round up all this in 5 weeks. Is it okay?
Okay, I'm clarified. Thank you.
You're welcome. Man.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, I'm with you, please.
Okay, please. So currently, I'm not in a conducive environment, so all I've been doing is just on my phone. So probably when I get home and maybe hands on my I'll be a lot. If I'm having any issue with the lab, can I send it to the group?
Yeah, sure. If you have issues, you can always send it across. Any problem you have, you can always send. But please make sure you have a good functional system, so that sometimes if you don't have a good system, it's going to frustrate you a lot. Yeah.
All right, thanks, sir.
But feel free. I want to make sure everybody have it installed and it's working fine on your system, and you're good to go. So please, if we work with the time, we'll be fine. We've done this training before in the past, and it has been awesome. So there's no cause for alarm. If you just follow it strictly for this week, make sure you get all your labs done for the number of chapters we're going to cover. I'll update us with the timeline so that you work with the timeline and get all your chapters assessment online. Remember, you have an assessment to take online as we go on. So you'll be doing that as well as getting the labs done and also be sending in the labs. It will be wise to send the labs in as we go, and so that once we run up the program, you have everything all packaged and sent at once, so that you'll be properly graded in due course. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your time. Like I said, I'll make the recording available after now. I'll post it to the group, and those that were not here can also be able to watch it and then follow through. Thank you all, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.